Hi and welcome everyone to this episode of Breakpoint. The topic for today is sprinting securely, pen testing, keeping pace with agile development. Our guest for today is Sanoop Thomas. He is a security researcher with experience in both offensive and defensive security and has worked with various fintech organizations. He is the author and maintainer of Halcyon IDE and has spoken at various security conferences. He's also the host for InfoSec Campus Sec Tools podcast and has been the organizer for B-Side Singapore for last 4 years. Hi, I'm Neelu, a technical security enthusiast and your host. I welcome you to the Breakpoint Security Podcast. In this podcast, we'll explore the depths of defensive security. We learn the methods and techniques that the smart security teams are using to solve practical security challenges today and innovate their way into the future. Welcome to Breakpoint, Sanoop.
Hello. Thanks, Neelu.
So, we are on the topic of security champions and pen testing, and generally both those words don't go together in the same line many times. So it'll be interesting to have that conversation with you today. The first thing that I want to start off with a slightly lighter side of the topic, which is the security champions programs, right? We have heard many people talk about it, and in the industry you will see that everyone talks about the champions program in a different light, in a different sense, just like they do for DevSecOps, right? Everyone has an interpretation of that. And they also have a different definition of it for themselves. What was your goal with it when you started your security champions program? And how did you ensure that the right kind of value was being added to the overall development process?
Universally in the security or AppSec side, the security champion programs are generally categorized as more of trainings. So you train the developers, testers, QA folks, and then expect they'll pick up their own. But at some point, it's not really actionable. It is more of the training delivery, and it becomes very repetitive. So you just keep giving trainings, but you don't see any results of it. You don't see how these trainings are actually going to be impacting the AppSec lifecycle. Security champion programs can be effective when you know what kind of business are you into and what is the development culture, what's the security culture, and then kind of design it in a way or tweak it in a way it fits to your organization. So it's not, you can take general concepts from the industry, what kind of security programs maybe other companies are actually using, or what are the general norms of running a security program, etc. But to actually fit that into your organizations, there's a lot of other efforts to do in terms of understanding what you want to establish in the company.
So essentially, talking about the program itself, did you start with a certain deliverable in mind in terms of value add, or you were thinking of, okay, we want that at the end of the day, the security champions should be able to do A, B, and C as a part of the program? Like, what was your
So initially when I started delivering security champion programs, it was just the training part. But I started observing that these participants for the training are just keep it repetitive. In every iterations, the same phases I'm seeing. So I don't see any values that's coming up. So I keep asking them, like, what do you do after finishing a full-fledged AppSec training? Like, what do you do after that? Like, they go back to their desk and they just busy with their own deliverables, developing, testing, and whatnot. They don't have a bandwidth to pull off a security testing of their own, or they don't have a guidance in practical, like how do they build these things on their daily work desk. So I invested some times to understand what is their routine, what is their daily activities. How do they start a day, and how do they go through a release? What time they can do? I mean, what extra bandwidth they can pull off? Or is it supported by the management? Is it supported by the PMs? Or all those aspects we need to actually understand before we push work to them. And I personally believe that security champion programs is not just pushing tools to the developers and ask them, hey, run this, and then you're done. They should understand what are they getting into. Some of them are not interested in security, and some of them are. You train like maybe a 10 people developers, maybe 1 or 2 people will be interested in security. They can actually contribute more to the program. They can align with what you are trying to achieve in the company. So we build a security champion programs in this manner, like to understand what are they capable of at the moment, and what do I want to achieve, and is there any alignment in between. And then we build an actionable program for them, where they get the training, they go back to their desk, and they can actually implement in their work. And more importantly, they find a value for it. They find, like, why do they invest time in doing security? Because that's the security people's job. That is not a developer job. That is not a tester's job. So why should they invest in doing security testing of their own if we are going to do it anyways? Or if maybe a DAST is going to do anyways? Like, that's the selling point we need to convey to them. And then once they see the value of it, they are on board and they actually can contribute even more to it.
Yeah, so actually, that is what I was also curious about. That developers or development teams today already have a lot on their plate, even in functional terms, right? There's a lot of story points to deliver, a lot of things to test, and they are working with hard deadlines. And just for the audience here, most of the security champions that you would see today are essentially security coordinators or people who are championing for security in their teams. But they do have a full-time job. Like they are either doing development or they are into testing. They're into functional roles full-time, and then they do end up actually giving that extra time for security from time to time. So what was your prime motivator for them to go that extra mile? Because generally, when we from the offense side come in and start talking about, hey, now you need to do security, we, I think, are socially not best in terms of selling this thing to them, being from a tech background. So what was your prime motivator that you were highlighting for them, or how did you actually sell it?
So all this started as a very selfish thought of, we are not, as a security team, we are not able to deliver what project team is asking for. Because as you said, they are very fast sprint culture. Agile in general is actually going like a bi-weekly releases. So they want to push maybe a weekly releases. And where would security fit in? And like, we will actually see maybe a 50 pen test request comes in, and we don't have 50 pen testers in the team to deliver these things. So it's actually a bottleneck for us to see what we can do and what's our capacity and how we can actually optimize it. And when I noticed about giving work to the doers, or rather giving work to developers and testers, they bring back the question to security team that, hey, we don't have time because we are already occupied with this week releases, and we don't have extra time to pull off maybe 2 extra days of pen test. And I took a top-down approach here. I went to the management's level and tried to pitch the ideas there, make them understand that this is what we are trying to achieve, and this is what we can possibly do with the existing resources that we have. Are you onboarded to the idea or not? So selling actually happens on the top level rather than the bottom level. Bottom level always chase on dates. They wanted to basically push their deliverable out. Everything extra is just an extra for them. Why do they need to do it? They should have interest. They should have time, both. And in most of the cases, they don't have both. So it needs to come. It needs to come from the top. That's what I believe, and it worked for us as company.
So you're saying selling to the right people rather than
Yeah.
selling. Yeah. I think that's very crucial. It's good to understand that. I think very early especially on the defensive side of security, it makes sense to have the right stakeholders involved from the very beginning, so that inclination helps with providing whatever else is required on the go, because it's not just tooling, or it's not just, so there are no individual components that can build a big successful program that will be effective. So yeah, rightly put.
Also, the fact is, like, actually we're trying to change the culture of developers. It's basically the mindset of how they think and how they approach the application deliverable when they code it and when they ship a code. Their mindset has to be tweaked. So that, I mean, in a way, it's a hack on their mind rather than on the code itself. So I've been working in Pentest for like over a decade, and I keep seeing the retest request comes in at the last minute, every single time.
That is the only constant in the whole changing landscape.
Yeah, and then they try to chase down, like, hey, we need to test it because tomorrow is the deadline. The finding needs to be tested, otherwise we will have troubles, we'll have escalations and whatnot, all that things. And they need to understand why they need to do it early. So usually in this agile culture, all these fast-paced culture, what's actually happening is they're adding a lot of features, bug fixes and all that. There is no space for a security fix. We try to sell security as it has to be part of the release. They need to schedule a portion of their development effort to fix items in every releases rather than waiting for the last minute. That part actually helped them because they get rid of all the last minute chases. So they find it like values that they can go ahead and find a budget for security within their dev timeline, within the release dev timeline, and they can go and fix it. Also, the security champion program is effective when they actually do things their own, right? I mean, it's not just in theory, but in very practice. One of the program that we did in the company, that we let the security champions perform retest efforts. And often retest efforts are pretty much the easiest one to start with, because they have the report, they know how to reproduce the findings, they have gone through the training, and now they have an avenue to retest it. So one, they are kind of keep sharpening their skills every releases whenever they are retesting it items. So they will, I mean, their memory will keep refining it. They will learn about new test cases. When they're actually doing new test cases, and the next time when they're updating a new feature, they know what test cases are going to be tested at in terms of security. The code becomes naturally secured. It becomes a part of their coding culture to add test cases or security test cases in their code.
Yeah, I think that reminds me of something called Conway's law. It's actually on the engineering side. Your development tends to take up the culture, the engineering culture that you have, and it reflects it also. I think if you have security culture as a part of it, it will start reflecting that as well. So yeah, that will be an effective way of doing it. But now that we were on the topic of pen testing, and we were just talking with that example, and I know that both of us are from that background and we are passionate about that subject, and that subject in terms of pen test in the context of security champions. Now we are talking about two different sets of people, where traditionally we've been looking at pen testing as a security teams area, and security folks are doing it basically. Whether it's an analyst or consultant, they're looking at and analyzing, attacking, looking at what the results are, and telling you in a prescriptive manner what to do, you as in the engineering teams. And here we are in terms of security champions who are the engineering team in a way, and they might take up various roles in this context. Now my question was that what is the key difference in the approach that you suggest in terms of pen testing in an agile development environment. And not just like, the question is not like, how do you do pen test in agile? The question is a little more nuanced, that what does that really mean for security teams today, where the expectation is same, you're looking at hundreds, thousands of test cases, different business logic scenarios, more complicated set of, attack scenarios. But what does that mean for security champions? So one is the case of retesting, which you called out, but in general, what does that mean for both of these teams, security teams and the security champions?
Right. I think often what happens is the application team, when we discuss about a release scope, they are just throwing every scope in that release, and they expect the security people actually take a decisions on whether pen test is required or not. These efforts are, most of the cases are actually pointless. If the project team is aware about which feature needs to go to security or not. When we train the developers on security champions, especially on Pentest side, we actually ask them, or we train them in a way that they should be able to determine whether a feature requires a testing or not. So it's kind of cut down maybe 3 hours long scoping discussions to maybe less than 15 minutes. Or sometimes they actually can determine whether pen test is required for these features or not. There is definitely going to be a slow progression of trust, because these things can be misused or abused. So we just need to make sure that they are not taking advantage of what we have actually given them as responsibility. So we keep doing like an random audits here and there whenever is required on an annual basis, whether they're on track, whether features are determined properly or not. And not every release is actually requires to go through a testing or like a manual pen testing, right? And we probably need to determine whether whatever the CDAST or whatever the automated CI/CD pipeline that you have in terms of security, DAS tools and whatnot. Some applications features needs to just go through a DAS scans. That's enough. And there can be cases where you need to invest more time in manual testing, right? And some project teams will be maintaining a very good security posture internally themselves. You don't need to test every releases, right? Take an example of an organization having finding remediation timeline as maybe low findings as 60 days or medium findings as 30 days or high findings are, 15 days, something like that, right? When we keep seeing low findings every single time, and every releases for maybe over 1 year or 2 year period of time, we keep seeing only low findings or best practices finding from this application team, because they internally maintain security properly. They go through secure code practices, they go through pen test cases and whatnot. They do maintain a very good security posture internally. If we determine a project team like that, they probably don't need to go through every single release pen test. They can have a collective or aggregated testing quarterly or annually. Because what are we trying to do here? We're trying to become like a very strict gatekeeper. For every releases, it needs to go through a testing. If you don't go through a testing, you cannot go live. And we are now expecting the application team to prepare for a week time, or maybe 3 days times, or 1 week time to specifically spend on pen test. So that 1 week we are blocking them. We're not helping them. And after 1 week, what's the results? The result is a bunch of more delays, but the result is anyways low finding. They will go live with low findings because they have 90 days timeline to go and fix it. So we try to actually help what do they want to achieve, where are they in terms of security, and then try to plug in play what kind of security champion programs actually fit to them, right? What I'm trying to say is like we all come from a Pentest background. and we're still doing pen test. And we always feel that if there is a code change, yes, do pen test. It's mandatory, right? And that thought needs to change. And we need to understand from the product side perspective and try to be more helpful rather than our fundamental philosophy of, or rather our ancient philosophy of every code needs to be tested. Everything that comes from a developers are insecure code, right?
Under the scanner is sacred. But but I think that is a highly optimized approach, as I understand it, to be able to, first of all, like when you actually talk about starting early, start thinking early if it is applicable and how much applicability is given the business context in terms of security. And even within security, while there are a lot of things you can do, particularly talking of pen test, which is a relatively slower aspect because it involves a lot of things, and is human dependent heavily. Think of where you can optimize that, what really needs to go under that thing than not. But I think I can relate to it also in the sense that for one of the programs that we were running, just like you were talking about Pentest, we had that thing, security champions taking care of threat modeling. And that's also the case with threat modeling, right? Any kind of review where you understand what is the business context of the application or the features that are being rolled out. Even in the context of an application, some features will be not that important or very straightforward or do not require too many input points and things like that. And those are technical decisions that you enable the security champions to take at the beginning itself. So they decide, okay, now, this thing goes under threat modeling or not. And similarly, I think in case of pen test as well, because that will take time.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very gradual process. So you can't do it in a one flip per day. This definitely needs to understand the project team, the business, and gradually progress in that direction. So it has time delay, but I think that investment in terms of effort and energy and everything is really pay off. As how fast are we trying to go? I mean, because when I started implementing all these things in the company, it was monthly releases. Now they're talking about weekly releases. So when we need to expect that these things keep happening in a very fast rate, the speed keep increasing. They're kind of adding up the pace of delivery. So you need to catch up early. I mean, the traditional way remains in tradition.
Yeah. And while the speed is improving and, technology will, I think the tech folks, the engineering folks will always come up with a solution. They're pretty smart at that in terms of the functional side of things. But in terms of security, is there anything else, like in terms of behavioral or technical differences or responsibilities, in fact, between security teams and security champions, which they can take up? Like one is the decision making itself, right? Whether it undergoes a pen test or not. But are there anything else, like, I mean, any kind of defaults that you recommend them or take them through? Anything else that they do on their end, like any kind of automation or test creation that they can do, that you think that some mature teams can go ahead and do for themselves?
And these things actually happens on the other side. When I'm saying the other side is, we always keep expecting the developers will start learning about securities and they will implement securities. I actually feel that the security folks needs to understand product. The security team needs to understand tech stack. What are they trying to do? And it's not very easy to just call out that, hey, you're using a jQuery XYZ versions, update it because there is going to be medium finding or a high finding, whatever reason it is, right? It's not easy to update libraries and, it's easy to just tell them as give them a finding. Sometimes it's not that easy. And so my suggestion is actually for the security folks to start learning about tech stack, start learning about how product is being architected, how this is being built, what kind of technology choices are they making, how this is going to be impacting in the long term, etc. Right? And now everybody is now slowly migrating from Angular to maybe some other platform because the support is going to be ended. So need to actually learn about all these aspects to support them. Unless we don't, now they're expecting them to speak our language where we are not ready to learn their language, right? It has to be mutual. It has to be a bridge, and both has to work either ways.
Yeah, I think in security boot camps, if the larger organization, they have some boot camps and training sessions, you should actually give them some dependencies which are vulnerable. Ask them to upgrade.
Yeah.
And then get into the security teams.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, the pain of developing and maintaining an application, I think a security folks needs to go through that to understand or to feel a bit more empathy.
Feel a bit more empathy, right? On that note, in empathy, there is a slightly different question that I had on the very approach. When you look at the overall approach of security champions, like I was saying, every organization is different, and even top-down will mean different for different organizations, right? Depending on their hierarchies, depending on who's the decision maker and how things go through. What works best in your understanding when you're running? So you are a security team, you're already running, or you're starting off with a security champions program. Do you go for a top-down approach in the sense of, I heard earlier that you did call that out, but this thing is, what are the benefits that you have seen in a top-down approach versus a bottom-up approach? What is it that they can achieve? Because in certain cases, bottom-up approach might help.
Yeah.
So what is it that you have seen with respect to the Security Champions program and also with Pentesting?
I might be wrong judging this on industry level, but this is my thoughts. I think for a startup, when they're building applications, a lot of things happens very quickly. The decisions makes very quickly, and the bottom level works better there. That's what I feel. People might have different opinions there, but I actually feel that you can actually pitch an idea to the actual coders and testers on the bottom levels. They will be able to implement it like right away. For a very established companies or some organization that has a plenty of processes and then decisions that are more taken from the top, by the time it reaches the developers, they only know about, okay, this is the timeline, this is the feature that we need to develop. They are more like doers. They are kind of following a certain orders. A top-down actually more feasible there. Because if your ideas don't get bought out by the top level, and it's not being added to the budget, budget, I'm referring to the time and effort they need to invest in every releases, right? They will not have time for it. They barely catching up delivering releases. So adding security to it, it needs to be specifically or explicitly added to the development efforts.
Yeah, in fact, they may not care much given the state that they would be in terms of delivery.
Right.
And yeah, I totally relate to it in many ways, particularly the size of the organization matters, your connection to the rest of the teams matter.
Yeah.
You might need a very big selling engine, like you said, right? If you're going in a large organization, going bottom up, it's difficult.
Yeah, and also, sorry to interrupt, but also sometimes the processes are quite old, and you might need to be a bit gutsy and question about these processes and try to change it. Security folks can do it. People in the security team, they are the one actually building all these processes and whatnot. You might want to kind of question about, is it making sense now? Because industries is changing, our development culture is changing. Should I challenge these processes and try to make an impact on that? Go for it. It's going to be, because we always just follow the processes and we know that, oh, these exist, so you just follow it, right? We don't try to kind of question these things. And security people should be having a bit more courage to question about what they have built or what their ancestors have built in the organizations and trying to break it. And that's what we built for.
Yeah, and we love to break. So
yeah,
that'll be one good thing. I think there are also certain aspects of these programs, right? Particularly the cultural aspect, which I've seen works great bottom up, which may not be, it's a part of the whole thing, because there is the process side, like you rightly said, and all of that needs to come top down. but the cultural side of things, where you are building practices, where you want them to get that mindset that somewhere comes with they seeing each other and being pushed in the same direction, right? So all of them start thinking in the same way. Those aspects, if you are thinking of, it's good to think also bottom up, because that will be a priority. But of course, with actually driving the program, and the program itself would, for many of our listeners, will also involve not just time, effort, but also in many cases budget for actual tooling. If it's an implementation program, or pen test, even in terms of pen test, the tooling and stuff like that. So there was one aspect which I wanted to drill down a little bit on, was of collaboration. So what about the collaboration? One is between security teams and the security champions, and within or amongst the security champions themselves. Have you seen that work? Like, how far can that be taken, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, we expect them to do security. This is an additional job for them, right? But we are not building a separate team for them. This is their call, because budgets are different from usually security budgets in most of the organization. So it's up to the project whether they want to invest in resourcing and whatnot. But until they find a value for it, they find profit of investing these extra resources, they don't do it. So showing these values are actually more important. And this is also security's responsibility to actually show them that, hey, this year we have progressed this far, right? And I mean, maybe I'm sounding a bit stupid here. Like, showing ROI for security is probably a more stupid line to say. But in terms of, giving an example, right? And this is how we do pen tests traditionally. We finish a test and we produce a report, and then they will chase the any findings if they want to like remediate it and whatnot, right? And when we work in a product-based company, we are fairly testing similar application, or maybe the exact same application over and over and over. As pen testers who are excited when we see new applications, it's easy to get saturated. I'm saying from the tester's perspective. When we see the larger picture, how this is going to be affecting the product, we'll see better satisfactions in the job, rather than just saying that, hey, I don't feel adrenal because it's the same app. I mean, I know in and out of the every single parameters what each page uses, right? I don't feel the rush of testing it. I know there can be like some cookie issues, some header issues and whatnot. That's it. Test is completed, right? But we have I've started doing this practice in my organization, is to pull out all pen test findings for one specific applications across one full year of testing. So you must have tested maybe 10 times, 20 times and whatnot, right? And we'll try to see what kind of findings are we seeing repeatedly. What are the type of findings that we are seeing, right? I mean, findings means that there is something is messing up, something gone wrong during the development time or configuration time or deployment time. And where are we messing it up? When we show these statistics to them that, hey, configuration level, we are seeing maybe 100 finding for a year, right? And we should not be, because we should follow a secure configuration practices. And how can we do it? Then security champions, who are usually maybe developers and testers, will now talk to the operational team on configuration side. Like, these configurations should not be there, but these configuration need to be changed to do the extra. And this is one product team is giving this feedback to the operational team, and the operational teams are maybe serving 10 other applications. It becomes a culture for them. It's just kind of sort of butterfly effect. It just keep expanding. And we'll see result pretty surprising. You can probably eradicate a full class of finding just by doing this practice. The point I'm trying to emphasize here is pen testers should not just focus on testing the applications and sending out the report and job done. Our job starts when pen test report is gone out. We need to actually start thinking about what's going wrong. We are testing this application for several years. and how can we better it. It's not about number of findings that you're discovering in an application, but it's about how safe I can release my code. We are part of developers team. It's the cat and mouse game kind of slowing down. It's not happening anymore. We normally say that the developers versus security, or developers versus pen testers. Now we are kind of part of it. So buddy them up and try to make sure that the code they releases are secure, and what we can contribute to help them. That's what my thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent example of collaboration and how you can actually leverage. So in terms of numbers, we are less, security teams are always lesser. And that's the whole idea, that the security champions, what you cannot do in terms of numbers, you can leverage the group of security champions to do that, as long as you're clear with the idea that you're passing on, right? I mean, in this case, having the right kind of communication with the right teams will save you a ton of different issues in future happening. And this is something that I also experienced. Like for our we had a huge set of security champions, and we had this collaboration in groups happening from time to time. But we saw this particularly in case of Log4j, right? I mean, so what we used to do earlier, for example, if we were in a services org, we would have, 7-8 different kind of CIs being used in different projects. So we would develop a template for a couple of CIs, and other developers will work together and develop those templates for other kind of CIs. So that way your effort also goes down. But in case of Log4j, particularly when we had some catch-ups with all the security champions, and we were able to solve some of their problems, they still had a ton of questions, because I think at that time, you would remember, Log4j was coming up in different components nobody had thought of and imagined. And I think close to 30 to 40% of the questions, some of the security champions were able to answer for the other set of security champions, which was really amazing to us, and eye-opening what level of cooperation can go through, collaboration can happen between the security champions to take things ahead, even at a time when, it's an sort of an emergency.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice to see their response time. They don't need to wait for a security subject matter expert to just come on board and then discuss about these things. Things can be solved on their level. They should be taking charge on it.
Yeah. Cool. So now that you were talking about, and I think my last thing, which I have seen is not very easy to do, even if you might have a set of security champions. What will happen on on this side of security is that you will have attacks, breaches, you will have a lot of things happening, new exploits coming up, new ransomware coming up. There's a lot happening on the attack space side. With respect to security champions, then it happens in this way, that they need to keep being educated, so whether it is security team educating them, or they looking after, updating themselves and keeping with pace with these attacks happening from time to time. As a security team, and as a practitioner, how would you handle this, continuous education or a skill development kind of a thing for security champions, particularly when there is so much evolving, like not just the tech space, the attack space is also evolving. So how do you do that? How do you recommend that happen?
Okay, being a trainer for a few years, I can actually vouch a statement that the best way to learn something is to teach. When we build a security champion program for maybe a specific team, and if these people keep changing, right? I mean, there are new people coming in and whatnot. I've seen I've encouraged them to do it, and they started practicing it, and it was effective. Which is, if I train one individual, or maybe 3 individuals, spreading to like 3 different departments, they started delivering these trainings internally. And by doing it, they actually create a culture of security education within the team. They don't expect of course, as security team members, we are not kind of offloading all our job to them. It might sound like that, but it's kind of cultural effect. It's kind of giving them a mindset of thinking securely, think about security whenever and whatever they do. And to do that, we need to find interest in them. And Pentest looks fancy from outside, but internally it sometimes can get bored. I'm getting too much attrition already by saying that. But what I'm trying to say is, like, if you try to preach about Pentest to developers every single time, some of them will learn it, some of them will say that, hey, why should I learn it? I'm a developer, I don't want to learn about these things. They don't have interest in, and let go. But those who are interested about it, they also will have interest in the opportunities whenever they get to teach someone else. So a new security champion joining their team, or the new PM joining the team, they can educate themselves that, hey, this is how we should do testings. We are doing retest by our own. These are the tools. You should use it this way. This is how developers anyways learn internally. New frameworks come in, new test cases come in, or maybe a specific test harness they are changing to different technology or something. This is how they learn. And they have that sharing knowledge mindset in them already. We are trying to just exploit it and then feed security instead of just developers, right? It works. And continuous education is mandatory for any field, not just in security.
Yeah, I think totally. And they also take it in the right spirit. I mean, I have seen some of these education, when it's passed on, their examples might be different from what we give for a certain threat category, for example,
right.
Or an attack category. But then you see how innovative they get with that. And that's really, really amazing to see over a period of time.
Yeah, I mean, things like we probably in the training maybe showing an exercise as something very plain vanilla, something like or a SQL injections with like or 1 equal to 1, sort of very vanilla stuff, which may not happen in today's modern app due to whatever framework they are using. Some of them will have their own internal security controls to prevent all those mechanisms and whatnot. But anyways, the point is, when they start teaching this internally, they can pick up real payloads that they have seen. They can pick up real vulnerable code they have seen. It's more believable, right? I mean, we used to teach people and show that, oh, this happened, this is the example, and the convincing part takes more time. It's difficult for an audience or a participant for a training to accept that, oh, security happens in an application, right? We need to sell it. Now the selling point is less, because they can show the code on their own app and say that, hey, see, we did wrote this code back then, which is vulnerable for excesses or whatever the attack. Easy for them to learn it, and they know these mistakes should not happen again.
Yeah, I would say it's done with a little more style, but
that's
a controversial statement to give.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, I think this was a great conversation today with you, Sanoop. Thanks a lot for joining us on Breakpoint and this episode.
Thank you, Nilu.
Thanks, folks. Do check out the podcast by Sanoop. It is InfoSec Campus Sec Tools podcast. I will put the link to that in the show notes below, so you can check that out. Thanks everyone for joining us today in this episode of Breakpoint. See you all in the next episode. Bye-bye. Hey folks, that's all we had for today. I hope you enjoyed this one. Visit the podcast page for more such interesting episodes. You will find the speaker suggestions and other details in the show notes below. If you're interested in a security challenge of your own or would like to hear from a specific speaker or team, let me know in the comments below. Lastly, if you liked the episode, please go ahead, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and share with others in the community. It always means a lot when you do that. We'll see you in the next episode. Until then, Breakpoint signing off.